total size is about 4.7 trillion RMB yuan, a year-on-year increase of 11.5%. Export was about 1.5 trillion RMB yuan, a year-on-year increase of about 14.7%. Import is about 3.16 trillion RMB yuan, 10% yearly. And also for service trade, it showcases several features. Firstly, we carry on the high-speed growth since early this year. In November, service trade, including export and import, had an increase ratio of about 14.9, 18.6, and 12.9% respectively. So service trade high-speed growth represents our economy is turning upside, and also we have a good momentum. Also, secondly, the proportion of service trade in the total export and import pie is also making a new record, with China's service having a bigger influence in the international stage. We have a bigger strength in service trade. In the first 11 months, service export takes up of about 33.3% of the total size of a service trade, 0.9 percentage point higher than the year earlier. Also, thirdly, we have a balanced situation between export and import, particularly for the knowledge-centered service trade. At the size of about 7.7 billion RMB yuan, 26.2% increase compared to a year earlier. And among that number, telecommunications, information technology had an export of about 270 billion RMB yuan, 43% higher than a year earlier. Import had an yearly increase of about 20.9%. Import had an increase of about 10%. For the entertainment service trade, the export is about 6.9 billion, 47.6% higher than a year earlier, with the import had a yearly increase of 19.2%. And fourthly, the feature is we are turning to the high-end service trade, particularly those cutting-edge service sectors. For the IPR royalties, the total size had a yearly increase of 20.9%. Export was about 32 billion RMB yuan, with a yearly increase of 15.4%. Import was about 210 billion RMB yuan, with a yearly increase of 20.9%. As to R&D, they had an increase of about 13.6%. Import had an increase ratio of 12.1%. As to the service trade relevant to IPR, its high growth showcases that China is having higher demand for such a sector. It also demonstrates that China's capacity of technological innovation is on the rise. So that's the basic situation I want to present to you. Now, I am ready to take your questions. The floor is open. Thank you. As we have noticed, because of the China-US consultation, both sides have been doing some active measures. What is the progress made about the consultation, and what is the possibility of achieving some agreement recently? For the consultation lately held on the 21st, could you give us more details? Thank you for your questions. What I can say is that even though now the U.S. is celebrating the Christmas festival, the China and U.S. teams responsible for the consultation are still keeping their close contact. We are moving forward according to the schedule. That's all I can say. Thank you. The next question. Thank you. From CCTV, as we have noticed that we heard in 2019, in January the 7th, the U.S. will send a delegation to China for the consultation. Is that the truth, and what will be the contents of the consultation if that is the case? Thank you for your question. As I said, both teams have kept their close contact, and next January, in addition to the calls on both sides remotely, both sides have indeed prepared for a face-to-face communication. The next question. Thank you. Recently, the foreign investment law has been subjected to the NPC for approval. And my question is, for this newly revised foreign investment law, what is the highlight and what is the difference from the previous version? Thank you for your question. After 40 years of reform and opening up, we have a joint venture corporate law, the cooperation law, and the foreign investment law. Those three laws constitute the major structure for foreign investors, and those three laws have paved the way for China to open wider and making full usage of foreign investment. The newly revised foreign investment law will replace the above-mentioned three laws, so this revision will become a fundamental law for this new era. The foreign investment law, compared to the previous versions, have certain highlights and differences. The first one is we have clarified the national treatment and negative listing to manage the foreign investors. Since the 18th National Congress, all of the results we have made for foreign investment have been cemented with legislation support. The second thing is we will enhance investment facilitation and protection. With this revision, we have a specific chapter to regulate the measures and requirements for the protection and facilitation of foreign investment. So from a legal perspective, we will facilitate the foreign investment in China. We have clear guidance with this law. Any foreign company or foreign investors will have a better way to protect their legitimate rights with this legal basis. The third feature is for the objects of this law, it's about the foreign investors and their investment behaviors. We will not solely regulate the forms of corporate governance and their operation models. Those operational models and forms will all adapt to the laws and regulations, universal for different market players. So for the previous three laws and the corporate laws will be taken differently. And we believe that this newly revised foreign investment law will be beneficial for China to create a fair playing ground. And we will also help to promote trade, freedom, and facilitation to create a favorable condition for foreign investment here in China. Thank you. The next question. Thank you. From the Economic Daily, also about the foreign investment draft. In the draft, we sense that there is one specific chapter to protect the investment. So what's your take on that chapter? And also, by combining the three previous versions, what has been done by the MOFCOM? Thank you for your question. For the investment protection chapter, a long time ago, the Chinese government put high premium on the protection of foreign investors and the behaviors in China. So by improving the laws and the legislation and certain documents, we are stepping up our efforts in the protection of those rights. So this chapter is a result of our past years of experience with a dedication to this sector in order to better protect the investment of foreign investors. So for foreign investors or foreign companies, if they're concerned about, for example, compensation, the remittance of their revenues, the IPR protection, technological transfer, and local government commitment to the agreement. All of those have been specified in this chapter. We believe that with this new promulgation of foreign investment law, the foreign investors and foreign enterprises will be reassured. They will have better ground for safeguarding their legitimate rights with this legal guarantee. And China's foreign investment environment will be better encouraged with more fairness and transparency and also rule of law. And as to the efforts made by MOFCOM, recently, according to the arrangement of the CPC Central Committee and the State Council, MOFCOM has been engaging with different entities to take up the drafting of different comprehensive documents. So for investment protection and investment facilitation, we have certainly done our part. We have contributed to improving China's foreign investment environment and stabilizing the sources of foreign investment. The combination of the three foreign investment laws will also be one key task for MOFCOM. We actively reform the legal system of foreign investment, and we have solicited the opinions from different players thoroughly. With that effort, for those practical experience from the previous practices will be carried on, and we will further legalize those practices this time. We have also submitted our draft to the State Council in order to contribute to the legislation of certain documents and laws. For the next step, we will continue to be guided by the CPC Central Committee and State Council and support the legislation work so that this foreign investment law will be out at an earlier date, and our foreign investors will have fairer environment and also foreseeable environment here in China when they invest here. Next question. Thank you. From the news agency. This week, State Council and the MOFCOM co-published the negative listing. So in June this year, we also have published the negative listing for foreign investors. So I would wonder, in the two negative listing, what are the differences for the market access of foreign investors? How can we align those two? Thank you. Thank you for your question. The newly published market access negative listing mechanism is adaptable to the domestic and foreign investors. That is to say, all market players, including domestic and foreign enterprises, as long as they invest here in China, must conform to the requirements of this listing. And for the negative listing, specifically for foreign investors, that is adaptable to the investment behaviors of foreign investors in the China land. So that is specific for foreign investment. Those two negative listings both could reflect the principles of fairness and equity. As you say, recently we would work together with certain entities to further improve the market access to foreign investors, so that both domestic and foreign enterprises will have a fair playing ground when it comes to market access. This will better regulate government behaviors and create a fair market environment here in China. That would also revitalize the incentives of different market players. Thank you. I come from the Global Times. Recently, the Department of Commerce in U.S. has published their newest results about their investigation in China, saying that China has different dumping behaviors. So what is the response from the MOFCOM? Thank you for your question. On December the 21st, the Department of Commerce in the U.S. published their investigation result about the Chinese enterprises, implying that the Chinese enterprises have certain dumping behaviors. And the U.S. Department of Commerce will file this case. According to the procedure, the U.S. International Trade Committee will make a decision about whether such a behavior will cause some damage in the commercial sector in early 2019. After that decision, the U.S. Department will introduce some tariff measures. Also, in October, the U.S. court has heard two cases about the Chinese enterprises, and also that was rebuffed. We asked the U.S. to rehear this case. We hope that by hearing those cases, the U.S. part could also conform to the principles of equity and fairness of WTO in case that those trading rules will be abused. We indeed look forward to the protection of the Chinese enterprises' legal rights. Thank you. Thank you. Recently, according to the Central Economic Conference, the goods and elements must freely flow, and we must also have institutional design for that free flow. Different fields must have independent operations. So does it mean that we will further relieve market access threshold? What are the major fields that may be open to the sole proprietorship of foreign investors? Thank you for your question. Over the past 40 years of reform and opening up, China's economy has been growing under the openness. So in this new era, to achieve high-quality growth, we must open wider. According to the arrangement of the Central Economic Conference, we will adapt to the new era and showcase new features in order to have overall opening up nationwide. We will further relieve the market access to foreign investors. Different departments will focus on like telecommunication, education, culture, and open wider in those fields. Particularly, there are some fields concerned with the foreign investors like healthcare and education. We will reduce the requirement about the share of foreign investors in the shareholding system. Thank you. From international business, with the new year around the corner, what are the measures of MOFCOM to trigger consumption at this turning point? Thank you for your question. To guarantee that during this New Year festival, we can guarantee the supply of goods, we must enhance our management of the trade and goods sector. We must keep encouraging consumption to meet people's need for a better life. And MOFCOM has made certain arrangements accordingly. Based on the situation in the market, we will take the following measures. The first one is we will combine production and sales and extend the channels of sales so that during the festivals we will have a diversified supply of consumption goods. And also we must be prepared for different uncertainties in the market like the cold and the low temperature. And based on different localities, we must highlight vegetables, poultry, eggs, grains, and dairy products and other staple food in their supply. We also detailize our emergency response measures, and we must take different drills for such emergencies to guarantee the sufficient supply during the festivals. And secondly, we must guarantee the pork supply. We will initiate the daily reporting system for the supply of pork. We will connect to different localities in the cooperation so that the central and the local areas will work together to divert the pork resources into the market so that pork and its replaceable products will be supplied to the full. And thirdly, we will harness the importance of information during some weather disasters, which may lead to the sharp increase of price. The MOFCOM at that moment must instantly initiate the daily reporting system and publicize the supply and demand information on a daily basis to the public to better guide the behaviors of both civilians and the producers. And fourthly, we will encourage consumption. We encourage enterprises to grasp the opportunity at this turning point, and they must fully harness the power of local customs or the local tourism attractions in order to hold different festivals like the cuisine festival or food festival, and the commercial fair must be exhibited to the public in order to meet the diversified requirements of the civilians in consumption. Thank you. Thank you. We noticed that the subsidies of NEV next year will have some reform. According to the Ministry of Finance, from 2019 to 2020, the standard of NEV subsidy will be reduced by about 40% compared to 2018. So what's your take about the NEV market next year? And what about the plan of the new energies next year? Thank you for your question. In recent years, our NEV market has registered rapid growth. From January to November this year, the NEV sales was about 1.03 million, a yearly increase of about 68%. So the high-speed growth of the NEVs is a result of the national government's incentive and also the technological advancement like batteries and the reduction of their cost. Also, it is a result of the willingness of our consumers. As to the general trend with the technological development and the higher willingness of our consumers, as well as the improved infrastructure, as well as the scoring mechanisms, as well as other incentivizing policies, in 2019 we expect the NEV market to be further enlarged with a fairly rapid growth rate. According to China Automobile Association's forecast, in 2019, the total sales will be about 1.6 million. And we will connect with different agencies to further cultivate the new growth points of the NEV market. For example, we will increase the effective supply by increasing import of NEV and better harnessing the power of foreign investors in the field of NEV. And also, we will keep the reform of supply and demand side. We must also tap into the potential of our consumers. For example, we may consider the replacement of the old and not useful second-hand cars in order to change them into the NEVs. Any more question? From Caixin. Could you give us more details about the conference on December the 21st at the Vice Minister level? For that question, I've already answered in the beginning. All I can say is the China and US teams responsible for trade relationship are keeping closely in contact, and we are moving according to the schedule. Thank you. Any questions? From Reuters.
According to sources and an article that Reuters has just published, President Donald Trump is considering an executive order that would ban American companies from using services provided by ZTE and Huawei. Does China have any comment on this? Thank you.
For that question, I'm not in the know of the details, so sorry about that. If there is no more question, then this is the end of the press conference. Several days later, it will be the new year. So here, on behalf of the MOFCOM, I would love to extend our congratulations to you all and also greetings to all of you. Thank you.